Well, hello guys, and welcome back to another one of these. Sorry I didn't do the gear change show last night. I had a bunch of by the time you guys see this uploaded, you guys will see a thing of Ultra Instinct Goku basically doing this thing, and I'm going to just start by saying thank you for all the views and stuff like that. I'm really indebted to all you guys. I think we're somewhere in the region. I forget how many views we have total right now, but I can actually tell you guys right now because I have actually downloaded YouTube Studio on my iPad, so I can now tell you guys what we're doing as of late. So we've been going from strength to strength, guys. We've risen quite a bit, even though and it's been healthy. Last 7 days we've done 29 views, and last 28 we've done 92. Last 90 we've done 385, and we've done over 1,528 in the last 365 days. In September is to 71 views after starting solo earlier. We're entering the last. Oh yeah, by the way, happy fall, everybody. Happy fall happened Thursday. No, it happened Friday because I'll upload the video, I'll upload the photos of I'll upload the photos of the candy apples that I did on YouTube. So I'll do that earlier today. And 2023 has been very good for us, giving us a total of 12,076 for 2023, almost double. Well, not almost double. Double last year would be 1,600. So we're almost way up from where we were in 2021. As I said, when I do the stuff like that. But enough about that. Enough about me. Enough about the channel. It's great. You guys have given me a lot of views, and I think we're up to. Notice I say we because I love you guys so much. So we're up to almost. So we're just short of. We've already passed 8,000 views for the channel a little bit. It may not say that on YouTube. YouTube has hit a couple of mine because they are not monetized or they've been copyrighted or some stupid idea like that. So we're at 7,934. So we're like 60. So like 60 views away. So I'm gonna say next month, or I'm gonna say next month in November, we're gonna start seeing the views. We're gonna see the channel properly hit on the website hit 8,000. But yeah, so I'm gonna do gear change show today, guys, because I'm nice and peppy. I have my breakfast. I made my own coffee, and I'm really peppy today. So we're gonna talk about the gear change show. Sorry. Gear change show today, and I just wanted to start off the analogy by doing something related to in gaming a little bit. So for those of you who don't know, I'll actually, you know what? I'll get my 3DS to prove the point. Actually, if I have it around here, if I find it, I will show you guys. If I don't, then I'm obviously tripping. actually don't, and I'm not going to go searching for it, but what I'll say here is this. So, for those of you who are not aware, backwards compatibility and part sharing compatibility hasn't been around just for that. So, for those of you who own a 3DS, for those of you who own a 3DS or a new, not a Nintendo Switch, for own a 3DS, a Nintendo 3DS, you guys will know that there's backwards compatibility, meaning you guys can put a DS game in the chassis of the 3DS, although it will be slightly affected graphically because it's on a wider screen, obviously, than the DS. And they share a lot of parts with themselves because they are dual screen, and they do have hinge stuff like that, and there's a lot of interchangeability, and they're a lot alike. Same thing with the automotive industry a little bit. So back in the 1930s and 40s, cars were different, but depending on what model you got. Some models would get better engines than others. So a top of the line, so let's say you had so Ford had Lincoln, Mercury, and so the Ford Motor Company had Ford, Lincoln, and Mercury. I don't think Mercury came out too much later, but Lincoln came out with, but you wouldn't be able to get in a Lincoln Continental back in the 30s and 40s. You would be able to get a V12 in a Lincoln Continental, but you wouldn't be able to get a V12 in a Ford, because obviously a Lincoln is a luxury model and a Ford is obviously a mainstay brand. So you wouldn't see V12s in a so you wouldn't see a V12 engine in a Ford. It'd just be absurd, right? Plus it would cost too much and it would be not so effective. That was a very not so great thing because it made certain models, in the 20s and 30s, it made certain models expensive, which kind of hurt a lot of companies during the Great Depression in the 30s, and then during the war in the 40s, because Ford, Chevrolet, Pontiac, and Ford General Motors, and Plymouth Chrysler had to all use the same chassis and stuff like that. But the more upscale a brand was, the better engines you got, the better trim levels you got. So let's talk about Buick, Chevrolet, and Pontiac and Cadillac. So the way how it went back in the 20s and 30s, it went Chevrolet and Pontiac were kind of Chevrolet was kind of a mainstay. Pontiac was kind of a actually I'm just going to do Chevrolet, Cadillac, and Buick because Buicks and Cadillacs have been around a long time, around the same time frame. So I'm going to say in the 20s and 30s. Let's say in a Chevrolet you get a 4-cylinder, a 6-cylinder. You get a 4-cylinder, 6-cylinder. 8 cylinders did not come out to. 8 cylinders in Chevrolets did not really come out until 1953, obviously, when the Corvette came around. Buick had the straight 8. Had the straight 8. Yeah, a lot of you guys are like, what? They used to have V8s. No, straight 8. Straight 8. 8 cylinders in the line. Then the old L had 320 engines and stuff like that. Big burly engine with knee action on the is the famous joke where Curly goes, maybe it's got knee action, you know. Kind of a tongue-in-cheek reference to automotive when they were talking about it. So, and then Cadillac was obviously top of the line. They had V8s and V12s, power in their cars and stuff like that. But there was really no part sharing, and you couldn't get a straight eight in a Chevrolet, and you couldn't really get this in a Pontiac when it came around in, I'm going to say, the 40s. There was a brand called Oakland at one point that I think Pontiac kind of took over. At one point, yes, there was a brand called Oakland in General Motors inventory before it went bust. So it's not the first time a division of General Motors has gone belly up because of some economic crises. So in the 40s, and so after the war, people started to kind of sit there and go, well, we kind of have to differentiate our models, but we can differentiate them by tune and stuff like that. By the 50s, this was kind of a big thing, but it's something that really, really changed the game but the engine that really changed the game for automotive, the automotive landscape, was when Ford introduced the L-head V8, the flathead V8 back in 32, 33, 34 during the because they had to get a cheap, powerful engine so that cars could actually move, because people knew that big trucks weren't going to really do it, and it became a big thing with the gangsters in the 30s as well. But it wasn't until the Chevrolet small block V8, because the small little 32 V8 that they had in the small little 32 V8 that they had was kind of small. It was like 200 something cubic inches versus the Chevrolet that came out with the 265. And I know if you guys are going to be going, oh yeah, so Auburn and Pierce Arrow, Duesenberg all had V8s on some level, but those were straight eights. Those things were all big long things, and they need big long bodies. Chevrolet needed something that was going to fit in the size of the Chevy Bel Air back in the 19, because they knew the Chevy Bel Air was going to be redesigned, and they knew they needed an engine, and a 6-cylinder wasn't going to do it, and a straight six, the Stoll-Bolt straight six, wasn't going to do it, because that's what Chevrolets were powered by back then. It was basically a truck engine, basically, and then eventually the V8 came out of it, and then General Motors division guys got an idea. So it started out in like 1953, 1954, where and Ford did this, and Chrysler did this too when they got their V8 engines later in the decade as well, because the 273 would be coming like in the late 60s, like the mid to late 60s, the early 60s and such. But right after the small block V8 came out, every automotive brand had one. So Chevrolet had the 265, the 265, the 283, and the 327 in the 60s. And Chevrolet knew that they could put multiple chassis to they could put multiple engines and multiple chassis regardless of trim level and everything else. What really got everything going was obviously something that happened that was brewing in 1957, 1958, 1959, which was obviously the consumers were getting antsy about chrome and access, and that sort of led to the breakdown of the economy, and we entered our first recession. What a lot of people thought it was going to be a depression, but it was a recession because obviously we were spending too much money. It was post-war. The post-war boom had basically stalled, and the post-war boom from 47 to 58, that narrow 13-year period was coming to a close, and we finally said, hey, we're all. So General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler all figured out that, yeah, we need economy models, but we also need to part share from our other vehicles. Can we do it? So Chevrolet, thank God, in the 1960s, figured out that it could put the V8 in almost anything, including the Corvette. It could put the 265 V8, well, actually, by 1959, it was the 283. So by 1959, they could put the 283 in trucks, they could put it in cars, they could put it in sedans, coupes, wagons, everything. Everything from the Chevy Nomad to the Corvette to the Impala, to the Chevy Bel Air, or the Biscayne, as it was known later on in the 60s. So the Biscayne coupe, as it was known. A lot of people know about the Biscayne, but I do. And that part sharing was going to help them out because Now, it was still pretty expensive, and it was still pretty expensive and stuff like that, and it gave an idea to Ford back in the 1960s, 1959, 1960. Enter the Falcon. So in 1960, the Falcon became what would be known as, now each brand had their own thing. The Falcon would be one year, the Valiant would be, all these cars were introduced in like 1958, 1960. So the Falcon was introduced in 1960, the Valiant was introduced in 1960. I think the Chevy Bel Air was kind of that. The old Chevy Bel Air was kind of that, although the Bel Air was getting kind of big. So they needed a model, and that's where the Chevy 2 came in, or the Chevy Nova, as some of you who actually drove one back in the 60s, or back in the 50s and 60s, even though if it was a one that was from the mid 70s with a straight 6 or 4 cylinder. So they all came up with economy engines. So you could get the Chevy Nova, the Plymouth Valiant, the Plymouth Valiant, or the Barracuda, as it will be known later on, with either a 6-cylinder or an 8-cylinder. So the Chevy Nova would have would famously have the 328, would have the 190, 153, would have the 153 4-cylinder, the 194 6-cylinder, and then the 283, and then eventually the 327. While the Falcon had the 4-cylinder, the 260 V8, and then would have the 289. The Slant 6 would be in the Valiant, and we'd also have the 273 in the 60s. But one car, but they were kind of sitting there going, well, we need to get a car that's cheaper. We need to get a sports car that's cheaper and stuff like that, because Ford had the Chevrolet and Ford. It became a war because of Chevrolet and Ford. Because Ford had the T-Bird and Chevrolet had the Corvette. Unfortunately, by the early 60s, by 61, 62, 63, the Thunderbird and the T-Bird had grown 4 seats, and the Corvette had basically ballooned to $4,000, and the T-Bird had ballooned to nearly $5,000, $4,000 to $5,000, I'm going to say, because it was a personal luxury car, even though Ford should have kept the two-door version to compete with the Corvette. That would have absolutely killed the Corvette, but obviously Ford wanted to consider the Thunderbird a luxury brand, and the Falcon, because the Falcon was going to evolve into something even better. Enter Lee Iacocca. Lee Iacocca basically was the Henry Ford. He revolutionized car design at himself. So Lee was like, we can take the Falcon, and we can take the straight 6. We can take the straight 6 out of the Falcon. We can take the 170 cubic inch straight 6 out of the Falcon. We can take the 280, we can take the 260 or the 289 out of the Falcon as well. We can put it in the body of a 2-door car that's going to cost, a sporty car that's going to cost $2,000, and with the V8 it'll cost $23,000 to $2,500. What car did we get? What car did we get out of that? Well, it's a car that's 60 years old this year, the Mustang. Yeah, I was going to have to throw the Mustang because the Mustang is 60 years old this year. Woohoo. I'm going to get a birthday candle for it and stuff like that. Even though it came out in April of '64, April 60. Well, actually, no, it's 23, so it'll be April 60. So April 64 was its birthday. So the Mustang's 59, but we came out to 2024 and 2023. So April 2064 will be 64 and a half. If you may, well, it'll be 24 and a half or something like that, or 23 and a half, or whatever you want, whatever the hell you want to call it. But so 60 years ago, Lee Iacocca told the Ford brass, "Hey, let's make the Mustang," and this was way before that they were gonna. This was right after this was right after the Ford. This was right after the Ford Ferrari war started, but that's a topic for another day. And yes, the 289 did have a role in powering that GT40. So they basically sat there and said, well, we want to be able to make sure that the everyday person who's got a decent job, because a lot of people thought that because Lee Iacocca and the Ford Motor Company figured, there's kids that have well-paying jobs and they're just coming out of college, or people who are working day-to-day jobs like myself. Unfortunately, can't buy a Mustang GT for cheap anymore. It's like $40,000 to $50,000. But back then, a college-age person who was making decent wage an hour, working decent job, could save up their pennies and get a $2,000 Mustang. So they decided to give it suspension, and they decided to give it suspension from the Falcon, the engines from the Falcon, the chassis from the Falcon, and the steering, and all the running gear from the Falcon. And it was a hit. Car sold 500,000 units within the first year. Even though famously in Ford versus Ferrari, when Ken Miles told to Leo Beebe, he says, "Sir, this would sell more if you shortened up the wheelbase, ditched a straight six, put a V8 in there, with 250 horsepower, you'd sell about 1 million of these in the first year." Well, Ken, they sold about 500,000 in the first year, and the next year they would sell, in 65, they would sell another 500,000 for about 1 million in the first 2 years. So yeah, so the automotive industry had been put on notice. Now the Corvette, the Corvette, which was its own nameplate, the two couldn't be compared, obviously, because the Corvette was a sports car in limited production, and the Falcon / Mustang was meant to be mass produced. They sold a lot. Now today they sell that many. Now today they don't sell that many because the price margin is a little higher, but buyers got the hit. So what did Chevrolet do to the Chevy Nova? Same thing. Put a 327, put a straight six in it, give all the suspension, but that would give rise to the Camaro, obviously, in 1967, because they would have the same engines as the Chevy Nova would in 1967. It's just a couple years after. I think Chevrolet just wanted to do it because Chevrolet's like, we're gonna do our research and we're gonna do a better job and stuff like that. And as we know, the Camaro and the Mustang have been going at it ever since. So that also gave rise to the muscle car era in 1964, 1965, because the GTO would completely wipe away all that. Pontiac's thing would be to put a 389 from a big car into a little car and make the muscle car, because it was an option from a bigger car into a small car and a medium chassis. So it kind of did it. And what was even better was the Mustang, the Chevy Nova, and the Chevy Nova, the Mustang, and the Plymouth Valiant also introduced something that we know today, and that is a big options list. So if you wanted some bright colors on your Mustang, if you wanted a blue or green car, you could get it. You wanted vinyl trim on your car, you could get it. You wanted a manual, you could get a manual. You wanted an automatic, you could get an automatic. And obviously it costs money, but you could customize the car instead of sitting there like, oh, one size fits all. I want to just get this car because that's all I know. I only know the automatic transmission and all that other stuff. You could get trim, you could get AM FM radios, you could get AM radios, you could get a CD, you could get a cassette player, you could even get, I think you could even get I think even in a Cadillac you could get a record player, kind of a precursor to the CD player. And you could get interiors, you could get, and if you wanted to drag race your car, if you wanted to do this, you wanted your car to be economical, but you also wanted acceleration, you could get a low rear end, you get a high rear end for acceleration, you get a low rear end for fuel economy. So, you get a high rear end for racing, you get a low rear end or for economy and stuff like that, based on your transmission. You could also get graphics packages and stuff like that. The Tempest would eventually evolve to the GTO, and the GTO the next year would be called the GTO permanently. And what it did for the automotive industry was it allowed them to save money. It allowed General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler to save money for when they wanted to make a new model. They could just dig into their parts bin, they could do it. And Plymouth would also do that with the Barracuda in the mid-60s. It would eventually be known as the Plymouth Gouda. We get the Dodge Charger, even though those models are more expensive. It would help keep the costs down, because if they didn't and they produced new engines, new interiors, and all that other stuff, Plymouth Gouda probably could have cost back in the 60s. Plymouth Gouda or Dodge Charger back in the late 60s, early 70s probably cost $6,000-$7,000 if they didn't do all this stuff, and it kept the cost down and stuff like that. But it was the Mustang who really got it all started. So it was the inventions of the straight six, the V8, and the economy car that got it in and got the idea to actually do part sharing. And is part sharing a great thing today? Yes, it is. It keeps the cost down. Keeps the cost down. The cars are more economical these days with the 4-cylinder and the engines with hybrid systems in them. So it actually does matter. So and it does make a difference. Does actually make quite a bit of difference. So if we didn't get that brainwave from Lee Iacocca, and he was known for a lot of things back in his day. I mean, he saved Chrysler from eternal damnation, even though he turned the V8s, and even though he mechanically made the cars inoperable later today, unless you have a Hemi in your car, but yeah, if it wasn't for the Mustang, and if it wasn't for chassis sharing, engine sharing, and running gear sharing, part sharing, it would have never have happened. The cost of the automobile would have skyrocketed overnight because, well, the automotive executives were in a recession. They had to figure out how to cut costs. So, and they did a great job of doing it. And it gave us some pretty good, and what did it do? It gave us some pretty good racing. It gave us some pretty good racing, and it gave race cars and sports cars a legacy to live with. So if it hadn't been for that, it would have been great. And plus, we wouldn't have the Corvette today if it wasn't for part sharing, because the 6.2 V8 that we have in the Corvette today is kind of a reminiscent of the 6.2 and the small block V8s that came out in the 60s and 70s. So if it wasn't for that, the car would probably, if it was its own niche little thing, car would probably be car would probably be $150,000 today. So, and it's getting close to that now because of, obviously, it's mid-engine. So, stuff like that. 2 announcements I have to make before I end the video. One, I'm actually My iPhone's downstairs charging, obviously. You guys are probably wondering how you're making this video. Well, I'm still using the Samsung right now, so it's connected to YouTube via Wi-Fi, so I'm able to do that. So tomorrow, I'm actually going to be getting the iPhone 14 Pro Max, and I'm not going to use it to test. I'm using it as a daily driver. So 21, 22, 23. So after 3 years with the iPhone. So after 3 years, so after 2 years or 3 years, if you don't count 21, because so I've had it for 3 years now. I'm probably going to use the Pro Max for the distant future, or until iPhone actually picks up their game a little bit, or they go back. Because I'm not getting the 15, because the 15, it's got a titanium body and it's got the USB-C, so I'm going to go with the Lightning connector instead. I'm going to get that phone tomorrow. I'm going to unbox it, and I'm going to activate it, then I'm going to unbox it, then I'm going to activate it off screen, and then I'm going to show you the ups and downs with it. So my cell phone bill is going to go up, but I want this 5G thing, because while I like this thing and I would love it as a daily driver, I kind of want to use it as a gaming tablet a little bit when I don't have the iPad, and I kind of want to use it to record Pokemon videos, because I don't have that ability to do that on the iPhone. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video today. I'm going to be probably on Sunday, so I'm probably going to be recording Gran Turismo stuff. I'm currently doing a Jaguar E-Type 1961 versus the Corvette C1 1957, and I'm going to be doing a battle with them next, and that's going to be the next thing. I've got a whole load of videos ready to go, so I'm just going to be able to plop them and upload them on Monday, because I hate recording them the day of, on Monday night, and then just putting them up, so I can put it up early in the day and forget about it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys enjoyed the Gear Exchange show. We actually did hit episode, I actually did upload episode, I'm actually uploading episode 91. I actually did upload episode 90, which I did on Friday night. So this is 91 for the Gear Exchange show. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll put this out right now so you guys can have it. You guys can enjoy it for the rest of the day, because I got to start uploading on my off days earlier, so I can upload content so you guys will watch it earlier, because I want to try to upload on my off days a little earlier than I usually do. So I'll see you guys then. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Just to let you guys know that if we didn't have part sharing, the cost of automotive, the industry, pandemic conditions not applying, the car prices would be a lot higher if we didn't have that. And a lot of people sit there and say, "Oh, it's too cheap. They cut back on costs." Well, the cars will be about $1 million. Well, if you want a car, if you want your base sedan to cost $30,000 to $40,000 like a Mercedes-Benz does, and not have the ability to fix it yourself, which you can't do with a Mercedes-Benz or an Audi, because you need a mechanic to do it. Yeah, we wouldn't have that today. So thank Ford, thank General Motors, and thank Chrysler, and thank all the automotive guys that thought this was a great idea. And I kind of wish the Germans kind of understand it, but they charge a little bit more money. So that's a reason why your economy cars are going to be cost half of what the economy version of a Mercedes or an Audi does. So yeah, I would have much rather pay that rather than pay that, because put it this way, in 1955, if you wanted a Corvette with a V8 with 195 horsepower, you paid over $3,500. You wanted a 6-cylinder, 240 horsepower Mercedes-Benz SL, you had to pay like $10,000. Just keep that in mind. Do you have to pay you'd pay more than it was more than double 369. It was like three times. It was like three times. It was like three times the price of. It was like three times the price of the Corvette, and the Corvette would last you a lot longer because it was made well by General Motors. I'm Mike Mo for the Gear Change Show. I will see you guys later. Probably gonna go for a walk in about an hour after I do some Gran Turismo stuff. I'll see you guys later today. I'll see you guys tomorrow for for Gran Turismo. I'm also going to upload a vlog earlier tomorrow because I'm going to try to do these early because I want to start getting into the mood of eating breakfast early and getting something in my stomach so I don't feel hungry all the time in the morning and I don't make bad choices. So, so I hope you guys enjoyed this and I will see you guys later. Good day, folks. Don't go away.